All right, guys. Real quick, I'm enjoying my morning 1776 Mocha. Out of my Andy's Tears tumbler. You pick these up in the store. I think they're 25 bucks. Pretty nice little tumbler here. Just a shameless plug for hilarious merchandise. And while I'm shamelessly plugging, please feel free to like, comment, subscribe. Go over to our YouTube page, which I will put a link tree into the comments here that you guys can follow. If you want to check us out on YouTube, Twitter, anywhere else, you want to share it out with people that don't follow us on Facebook, you can do that. So, today we are going also to this evening Quintrilia violin trilogy, a violin trilogy is playing this evening. So at Brood. So feel free to come on over. That starts at 7 o'clock. Good performance. So come on and do that. So today I'm going to break down. We're going to talk about HB 208 again because Huff has been online. Regina Huff, the original bill sponsor, has been online. We'll talk about HB 508 that was set up by Duplessis. And, you know, I sent him over an email the other day. He hasn't responded, but I'll tell you what the email said. And then a lot of people have been asking, like, what is going on in the courts? Is it HB1, SB1, SB2? You know, I'm making very clear to everybody watching, I'm not an attorney. Anything I am saying should not be taken as legal advice, because as we get into HB1, SB1, and SB2, and I start talking about its implications for business owners, I don't want you thinking you should always consult an attorney before you do anything, okay? So, and then I'll go over impeachment for you guys. So, let's dive into HB 208. So, why is it when we talk about a bill, we talk about the original sponsor of the bill so much? Well, the reason why is because in the state of Kentucky, the original sponsor of a bill can withdraw their bill at any point of any time throughout any of the process, right? So if we wanted to, we could put the pressure on Huff right now to the point where she should drop the bill. And, you know, there's an argument that she should drop the bill. And, you know, let's talk about what HB 208 does. So what HB 208 does is it is a half school funding bill, half telling your kids they can't return to school bill. So why do we need a school funding bill? Well, quite frankly, we need a school funding bill because large chunks of our public school population are moving into private school, are moving to homeschool, are not re-enrolling. But it's not so much that you can cut teachers. It is about, let's say, 20% of a grade. Well, the problem is that's not enough that I can cut teachers. Of course, my buildings cost the same. Everything costs the same. I'm used to pulling in all kinds of money. So, like this year, for an example, Fayette County Public Schools has brought in $16,000 a student. Sorry, $16,000 a student. Meanwhile, LCA, a private school that's in the same town, their tuition is only $11,500 a year, so it's about $5,000 cheaper. They have been in person this entire time. They have not had to shut down a time that I'm aware of from COVID. Actually, I don't know of any private school that's had to significantly shut down for any length of time due to a COVID outbreak here in Lexington. But meanwhile, getting $5,000 more per student on average, these public schools haven't been able to return. So HB 208, what it does is it allows schools to use their attendance records from last year because there's something called a SEEK fund. So about half of the government's, the state's general fund goes into what's called a SEEK fund, which is a school funding. So about half of all your tax dollars in Kentucky go towards education. That's the number one thing your tax dollars go towards. So anytime we're talking about education, the reason why everybody should care about education, whether you have a student or not, is because half of all the taxes you pay to our state every year is going to pay for education. So and it goes into a SEEK fund, and the SEEK fund basically figures out an amount they're paid per child that's in their school. Well, the problem is if, so let's say the SEEK fund is at $4,000 a student. Well, if I lose 4 or 5 students out of a class, let's say because we decided we didn't want to open up, I'm losing $16,000 a year. Now, real quick, what's do the math there. Remember, they're getting $16,000 per student right now a year. So if they've got 20 students per class, that's what is that? That is $320,000 a year they're getting for one classroom. So, should be plenty of money, but, it's a government. Anyway, so, but 4,000 of that, generally speaking, and I'm using very round numbers, and there's a deep dive on this, come from the Seek Fund. The Seek Fund is paid out per student. Well, if I have 20% of my students leave and go somewhere else, I still get to keep the property tax while serving less people, but I don't get that 4,000 per student. So if 4 leave, I'm losing that $16,000 a year, but my cost for my teacher, I don't get to cut a teacher, I don't get to cut any staff, I don't get to cut my building down, I don't get to cheapen my bills while losing that money. So that hurts me a lot as a school because I'm used to not having to tighten my budget at all and make cuts. Instead, I'm used to just spending money like a drunken sailor. And so what ends up happening is they're freaking out because they're worried about their funding. So Huff wrote this bill, which is funny because she says it's not backed. She's not backed by school unions, everything else. And then actually in one of her comments on Facebook, she mentioned she wrote the bill with a union of sorts. And then, and it should tell you enough too about the bill. Anytime you're seeing like 120 Strong and that group supporting a bill and the school unions, the teachers unions and everything else supporting a bill, that's a good and it deals with school. That's a good indication it's a bad bill. And if they're coming out and attacking somebody for attacking that bill or they're attacking a bill, chances are that's a good bill because it's taking power away from the teachers unions. Because at this point, I think if we can all agree on anything about COVID, teachers unions have shown they do not care about students at all. They only care about their own power. And so HB 208 was a funding bill, but what it does as well is it allows the schools to remain NTI only for the rest of 2021, and it goes into next year too as well. So the problem there is, why are we having a school funding issue? Well, we're having a school funding issue because so many parents are leaving to go to another school. And so as they're leaving to go to another school, that's what's causing our funding issue, but we're not fixing that. With HB 208, we're actually making the problem worse because we're allowing these students to stay close to in-person learning, creating more and more people like people I know that are going to private schools or they're deciding to homeschool their children because of this. Well, Huff is still getting a lot of heat from it because you all, and you should be, and we'll talk about it in a second, you all should be calling your legislators and sending them emails. You can't call them right now because LRC is closed, which, by the way, never let the government tell you you're not essential again. Remember, the entire legislative branch has decided they could go home for 4 days when they're supposed to be in session because it snowed kind of hard one of those days. Meanwhile, the rest of us have been working, I believe, the last 3 days and, just kind of dealing with the situation, but whatever. Anyway, but you can still email them. And we should be blowing Huff up because me personally, there's a part of me that says I understand. And this is the part of a parent. I have a 9-year-old student. He goes to public schools. My son does. He goes to public schools. And why the teachers have been so... for historically, we care a lot about our teachers, but part of the reason why is because, quite honestly, we have children. I have a child, and, sometimes my child's kind of a monster, okay? Sometimes he does things that aren't super well behaved, and I feel bad sending him sometimes to a teacher knowing hey, my kid doesn't really behave all the time, knowing that's got to be an issue. I feel even worse for them that they got to deal with 29 or 19 or 24 other kids, and that's how a lot of us parents feel. We feel bad for the teachers. However, we cannot confuse the teachers unions with the teachers themselves, and also as well, we have to remember that spending tax dollars for benevolent reasons because we feel bad for teachers shouldn't be because our kids are not well behaved, shouldn't be a reason to spend a lot of tax dollars, especially when private schools are showing they can do a better job for $5,000, $6,000 cheaper a year. And so a part of me saying, hey, you know what? The teachers' unions have been pushing and pushing and pushing for school closures. We all can admit the number one problem we have with education, public education, is the teachers' unions. Anybody who says public education has an issue can look immediately at teachers' unions and say they're the problem. That's the issue right there. It's not the teachers. It's not the students. It's not even the schools. Most of the time, it's not the school boards. It's the teachers' unions. So to me, especially to be able to expose the teachers' unions from being terrible, terrible people, and they made this bed of saying, oh yeah, we're going to fight to keep kids at home, and then when kids aren't showing up to school next year because we've done a bad job of servicing the students, we're going to try to get a bill passed that keeps our schools funded. Part of me says, you made the bed, you lie in it. Now, there is amendments 2 and 4, which fix the NTI issue with the bill. So if you're going to support HB 208 because you support giving the schools more and more money, that's okay. Support HB 208, but you need amendments 2 and 4 to get kids back in the schools. Otherwise, kids, especially in Fayette County, will not be returning to schools anytime soon, it appears. Additionally, however, I can make a case for you to not support HB 208 because, quite frankly, it's kind of a you made your bed, now you lay in it. Stop coming to us for a bailout for your bad decision making. All right. HB 508 is a gas tax. Duplessis, who is the sponsor of this bill, who everybody should be emailing Duplessis saying, hey, pull this bill. It's a gas tax. I know it's a gas tax. Now, his response to this is always it's an EV tax, and it does have an electric vehicle tax rider in it. However, it also has 4 other sections that deal with how the gas tax is calculated. I sent him an email the other day. I said, Duplessis, you cannot keep lying because you and me both know this bill will raise gas prices in July of 2022. It won't raise them in July of 2021, and he's right when he says it doesn't raise your gas in 2 months. In 4 months. It doesn't. It does raise your gas, though, in a year from now, and it allows your gas to be raised every year, your gas tax to be raised every year by up to 10% without there being a single vote on the matter amongst the legislators. That's a problem. That is a big problem. And so what I said to him, I said, you can't keep saying this isn't a gas tax. It's not going to raise your gas tax. And then in 2022, when you're up for re-election and it's the middle of the general election season and our gas tax all goes up, you're going to get hit with an attack ad right away that says Duplessis a liar. He said he wasn't going to raise our gas tax, but he lied about it. And the gas tax going up because of the bill that he sat there and told everybody it wasn't going to raise. He hasn't responded to me yet. I know he's seen it, though. And, quite frankly, we all need to be emailing him saying, we know what you're doing. It's gross. Stop trying to hide a tax increase with an EV tax. Now, a lot of people have been really confused on what's going on with HB1, SB1, and SB2. And you should be confused because, quite frankly, we are in completely uncharted territories. Now, at the beginning, I said a disclaimer. I'm going to say this again. I am not an attorney. Before you do anything, if you're a business owner and you're listening to this and you're going to hear some things I'm about to say and you get an idea in your mind, you should contact an attorney. Do not misconstrue anything I'm about to say as legal advice. I am just simply doing legal commentary as a human being that has an understanding of the law and has friends that study the law and have their JDs and has been talking to them, and I'm just relating to you what it's about. So, HB1 and SB1 and SB2 are all bills centered around restraining the governor's emergency powers. Now, what's difficult about when you're trying to write a bill like this is because you don't want to completely take away a governor's ability to respond to emergency powers or to respond to emergencies. We do not want the governor, for an example, if there is a situation where there's a flood somewhere and we need emergency funding for flood cleanup. What you don't want is the governor to have to call in legislators to sit there and debate and talk and figure out how much money to give to this flood fund. And meanwhile, people's houses are being destroyed because it's like a 2-3 day thing. Okay? that was the idea of emergency powers too. I think we can all agree that when we think of governor's emergency powers, we think of situations like snowstorms, power outages like they're seeing in Texas, temporary things that can normally be resolved in a short amount of time that maybe need, because the government has intertwined itself into our lives in such a way, we need it to be involved in solving this issue because it has the infrastructures to do it because it's intertwined into our lives, right? So HB 1 said that the governor cannot close schools, businesses, churches to in-person basically services. They had to be fully operational as long as they follow either CDC or state guidelines, whichever is the least restrictive. Okay? Well, the governor came in. He didn't like that. He didn't like HB 1, so he went to Judge Shepard, and Judge Shepard issued a restraining order. I'm just kind of giving you guys the overall story here because I'm going to dig down into what are the implications for this. Then yesterday we had a hearing on SB 1 and SB 2. SB 1 and SB 2 take away the governor's ability to call an emergency for longer than 30 days. After that, he would have to call in the legislators to then, be able to address the emergency. Which I think that to me is a great situation because I feel like anything that lasts 30 days is an emergency that needs the typical unilateral decision making of the executive branch. Instead, it's something that can be now, we know it's coming up, we know it's going to last 30 days, we can call legislators in 10 days before the 30 days are up, we can have them debate and talk and be able to get our voices, each voice, represented in the decision making process when it comes to emergencies. Because once again, I think after 30 days, it's just not an emergency. SB 1 and SB 2 also would take away the governor's ability to suspend state statute and instead would say that the attorney general, the governor would have to request the ability to suspend state statute and then the attorney general would have to approve the suspending of state statute. That's important to schools because we do have a state statute that requires in-person learning in Kentucky, and the governor's suspension of that is what allowed schools to be NTI only. Additionally, it has a rider on there saying, suspending laws, talk about HB 1, and, involving the AG. Basically, it just took several steps to control the governor's powers. Well, the governor doesn't like it for a lot of reasons. So he went to Judge Shepard when HB 1, which took effect immediately. Now, SB 1 and SB 2 took effect immediately, but they give those 30 days. So it really kind of gave some time for it to take effect. So that was what the hearing was about, was suspending SB 1 and SB 2. Now, this is how we're in such legal weeds at this point. We're in such a crazy situation legally that it is confusing to a lot of people on exactly the implications for this. And I'll give you an example. So let's just talk about how things normally go. So the legislators would pass a law. So they pass a law, the governor vetoes. Here in Kentucky, we have a simple majority veto, so we only need 51 votes to overcome a veto. The House and legislator repass the bill becomes law. Now, if that law is unconstitutional, what happens? Well, one of two things can happen. Either A, the governor can choose not to enforce it, like we have with the DACA situation, where deferred action for Dreamers, where basically they suspended the use of immigration law in certain situations, in which case the legislators could sue the AG, could sue the governor to follow the law and say, no, you have to enforce this law, and then there would be a court order saying he has to enforce the law, and then if he fails to enforce the law, then the governor would be in contempt, and yada, yada, yada. Now, let's say there's a law that is unconstitutional that gets passed. Well, if a law is unconstitutional that gets passed, normally what has to happen is, so let's pretend HB 1 was a law stating that everybody had to take my stuff, right? Everybody gets to take my stuff, which, Sounds crazy, but the way government's been going. Anyways, but a law that says everybody can take my stuff. Well, when that law passes, I'm an injured party. Once I become an injured party, I then can issue civil action based upon saying that law is unconstitutional. I'm a victim of this unconstitutional law, and I will take it to court, and then the courts will rule on whether or not the law is constitutional or not, and if it's unconstitutional, that creates, they can strike the law down, okay? If I think an action is unconstitutional, I have to be a victim of that action, and I can take it to court. That's how it works. What is going on here is the legislators have already passed the law, and then the governor's coming in and asking for the judge to restrain. The really confusing thing, and this is how you kind of understand how far into the weeds we are, is who's being restrained from doing what? Because the governor is restraining the legislators, but the law has already passed. I guess if he could have restrained them before they overcame the veto, we would be in a different legal conversation. But of course, that would be a lot more shaky constitutionally. So, but restraining the legislators after the law has passed, the legislators don't do anything after the law has passed. The law gets passed, and then the governor and the executive branch and police and sheriffs are supposed to do things. So, what I don't understand. So how this typically should have went, like, normally what would happen is the law would pass, and then we would, let's say, Brood goes ahead and follows HB1, and then the governor comes in and makes a mandate that violates HB1, and then I can sue him for violating HB1, and that would be how it's fought out in court. But instead, the governors went and restrained the legislators from doing I don't know what. And technically, Brood, Andrew Cooperrider and Brood, is not a named party in that lawsuit. So we're not a named party in that lawsuit. What are we being restrained from doing? HB1 already passed legally. So if I follow HB1 in my restaurant, the judge has not restrained me from doing anything because I'm not a named party. The legislators are being restrained from doing I don't know what. So I guess the only legal argument is, if anything, it is stopping a legislator from being able to, I guess if they owned a restaurant, they specifically couldn't follow HB1 because they're named in the restraining order, but I'm not. I'm not restrained at all. What am I being stopped from doing? I'm not a named party. So technically speaking, I could sit there, open up my restaurant following HB1, which we do have a Reopen Kentucky petition, feel free to sign, that kind of states this. But I could open and follow HB1 rules and guidelines. And I mean, technically speaking, if the governor or somebody tried to come after me for that, argument in court would be HB1's law. Because it is law. And we haven't been restrained, and then they would try to point to that litigation to say it's not law, and our response would be, I don't see Brood or Andrew Cooperrider being listed as a party in that lawsuit. Because we're not. We're not being restrained from doing anything. The governor isn't being restrained from doing anything. The legislators are being restrained from... They already passed the law. What are they being restrained from doing? That's my point. We are so far out in the weeds, it is completely on shaky legal ground on what exactly does issuing a restraining order against the legislators surrounding a bill that they've already passed mean even. Like I said 100 times, they don't do anything once a law passes. Which then goes into... If that's the case, then we can. This is creating a constitutional crisis, because what ends up happening is okay. So let's say that's the case, and so here's an example: the Boone County court case. They tried to say, well, because of the litigation going on with HB1 and SB1 and SB2, this case needs to be put on hold. That's what the schools tried to say. But the lawyer in that case, Chris Weiss, argued that they're not a named party. That has no bearing on what's going on because the school nor them are named in that case. That case has nothing to do with us because we're not named parties in it. And he also argued a lot of other things. But anyways, the judge ruled in their favor that case doesn't have any standing on what's going on with the Boone County school case. Even though the Boone County school case is based around a lot of those laws that were already passed. It already appears that we are in some crazy grounds here. And so, technically, if a really bold bar says, no, I'm going to be open past 11 because HB1 allows that because the CDC has no guidelines about curfews. So a bar says, I'm going to be open until 2 a.m. And then the ABC comes and tries to say, nope, you're breaking the governor's mandate, blah, 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 blah. They have a legal argument to say, what? Who's breaking what? That law is law. It's already been signed and passed. I'm not a party to the HB1, SB1, SB2 lawsuit. I'm not being restrained from doing anything. I'm following the law. There's an argument there. Once again, I'm not giving you legal advice. Talk to a lawyer. But what I'm saying is I don't know. I mean, it appears that is an option people could do. Now, on that same conversation about HB1, SB1, and SB2, then the judge comes back and says, his words are, you guys need to work it out. There's an issue of communication. You need to work it out because these bills are severely restraining the governor's ability to respond in an emergency. Well, yeah, that's kind of the point. HB1, SB1, and SB2 was passed to restrain the governor's behavior in a situation. Now, I can tell you this much. The suspending statutes law, there is absolutely no reason for that one to be knocked down. And to understand why it should not be knocked down, you need to look no further than the Beshear v. Akery. See, back in the 90s, the Kentucky Constitution states that only legislators have the ability to suspend the law. The legislative branch can suspend the laws, the statutes. Makes sense. They're the ones who pass them. However, back in the 90s, they passed a law stating that in a state of emergency, because they didn't want to be called into session, I guess, that a governor could, they're giving the governor the ability to suspend statutes in emergency. And so in Beshear v. Akery, they said, the judges said, listen, he can suspend statutes. If you don't like it, change the statute that allows him to suspend it. You're the ones who gave him the power. So that's one of the aspects of what they're doing is doing that. You can't say that's unconstitutional when they're the ones who in the Constitution were given the state Constitution were given the ability to suspend the statutes in the first place, and it was their call to hand it over to them. Now they get to pull it back. There is no argument that bill can't be passed. There is literally not even a good one that can't be passed. Now the judge says, hey, you guys need to talk it out and work it out. First off, screw you. We don't have to do that. That's what a veto process is for. We don't have to negotiate. We voted in people in a majority. They passed a law. You vetoed it. They passed it again. That is the end of the negotiation. This isn't how it works. The legislative branch doesn't have to negotiate with the executive branch on what laws they want to pass or not pass if they can overcome a veto. The only time they need to talk to the executive branch about whether or not they want to pass a law or work on a law is if they can't overcome a veto. Because if they can overcome a veto because they have such overwhelming support on a bill, they don't need his opinion. He doesn't get one. That's called a check and balance. That's how it works. So yeah, that's the entire point. But he's like, oh, try to work it out. Here's the thing they're not telling you. They can't work it out. The legislative deadline for submitting bills was Tuesday this past week. It had been extended till Tuesday this upcoming week. If they don't, quote unquote, negotiate and work it out before Tuesday this upcoming week, they can't work it out. They can't propose new bills. There is no working it out, and nor should there be. Nor should there be. And if they're going to let it down and let all Kentuckians down who voted them in just to control him because they want to work it out, I don't have anything to say to that. Which leads into the next... Well, hold on. HB1, SB1, SB2, it's a mess. It has no legal precedent at all. We're in very uncharted waters. It would appear to all those people saying, how can a judge restrict the legislator from passing laws? Like, really confused on it. You should be confused. You know who else is confused? The entire legal community. They're so confused because there is no precedent for this. And it's a situation where nobody knows how to respond, to the point where there's a legal argument that if a bar can be open and ignore curfew and can do it legally now, and has an argument when they came after for breaking the curfew, has a legal argument to say, no, I'm not a party to that. I'm not a party to this case over here. It has nothing to do with me. Which leads me into the impeachment committee. One, we need to be holding them accountable. I'll make it kind of short and sweet on impeachment committee. It's funny. I hear rumblings through the underground and everything else. The underground, from sources and people talking to these people who talk to that people. So it's all hearsay. But it would appear, based upon the words coming out of the mouths of people on the committee, that at this point Bashir could walk into the street and shoot somebody in the face, and he wouldn't be impeached. Because I don't know. In fact, one of the things I was told was that, hey, we're looking back through it, but, the last 10 governors have all done, impeachable offenses on these guidelines. Has another governor banned churches that I'm unaware of? Has another governor literally told an entire state they can't go to in-person services? I don't think so. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong. If somebody can find somebody in the last 10 governors that has said to an entire state you can't go to church, not like in a state of emergency in this one little area, this one church was flooding out, so they said you can't go to church there. I'm not talking about that. If somebody can find one person, one governor who has literally mandated the entire state cannot go to church, let me know. My quick search and common sense says no, that's not possible. Additionally, we had the issues going on in court, HB1, SB1, SB2. Let's say you fail. Let's say they get kicked out as unconstitutional. They stop from becoming law somehow, some way, and you have failed to rein him in at all, and you have failed us. Why should we reward you? Because you have the option of impeachment in front of you. You have that option in front of you for impeachment. What they should be doing next is calling Rodney Brewer to testify because the communications they're looking for is communications between the governor's office and KSP, and Rodney Brewer was the supervisor of KSP at the time, about the church ban. And what they should be doing is calling that a KSP officer to see, to get all the evidence stating that Bashir had knowingly, with premeditation, created a mandate that violated your First Amendment rights. That's what the research is over, and Rodney Brewer should be called to testify on that. That's what you should be calling them about and emailing them about. Tell them to get Rodney Brewer in there, and you need to be getting that guy. Do not let up. I know I just said the impeachment committee will probably never impeach, and they're just setting up to let us down. Do not let up. Keep emailing, keep calling, because at least then, when they sit there and they say, oh man, we couldn't do anything, we can hold them accountable and know that they've heard from us. They cannot pretend that impeachment didn't have support. They've already admitted it's got surprising amount of support. They cannot pretend that. We, by keeping the hammer down and by keep pushing them, will ensure that they cannot pretend it doesn't have support. So when they're held accountable for their actions, they knew better. When we can say beyond a shadow of a doubt, they know better. And listen, to every person out there that wants to say, legislate, oh, the system's broken, nobody will listen, blah, 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 they don't listen to the people anyways. I do have a question for you. I have a question for you. Those people who have that going through your mind. Have you emailed one time? Have you called one time? Have you knocked a door for a candidate? Have you ever donated? Do you even show up to the primaries to vote? If you're not doing these things, donating, knocking doors for candidates, volunteering, calling, emailing about bills, showing up to primaries to vote. If you're not doing those things, you don't have a right to say it's broken and nobody listens to me because you have not opened up your mouth to voice it. The NPCs, the non-playable characters, the people who don't care about their lives and what the government's doing in it, they sit by, they show up to the general every 4 years and vote. They barely show up maybe they show up every 2 years if they feel kind of motivated, and that's all they do. And if you care more than them and you want to change the way legislation is done in the state, you want to change the way things are done, start donating to candidates you want to see succeed, start emailing, start calling, start holding people accountable, show up to primaries. Now that I've scolded you, like, comment, subscribe. We have a YouTube channel, Andrew Cooperrider -Barood. I dropped a link to that in our link tree. Feel free to. You can donate on our link tree to the impeachment petition. So far, we've spent around $7,000 on the impeachment petition. So feel free, if you want to help donate to that, you can do so. The bill for that, if impeachment fails, probably be right around $25,000 total, $30,000 total. So if you want to donate to that, you can. Feel free to buy our coffee, share with friends, and be active, be calling, be emailing. Earn the right to say they're not listening to you. Thanks, guys.